I'm David Hunt and welcome to The Art Hunter. My guest today, I've known him for a little bit too long. I know too much about him, so it's going to get a bit personal as we go along. Hey, originally from Torres Strait Islands, up north, just off of Cairns, and a loving family member. And it's just so lovely seeing his social media, his connection with family. A master of cooking and a master at table decorations for the food. Again, it just blows me away. It's an art form in itself. Okay, started working in the arts in Western Australia and then moved to the NGV where he might have met his partner there. Don't know about that, but I think he is nodding, so I'm guessing that is the case. And then unexpectedly did a swing away and went to law school, as you do. I suppose he's got to work on some sort of a career, because believe me, he needs something to keep him quiet. And become executive manager of Indigenous culture at the State Library in Queensland. Currently CEO, he's important, of the Koorie Heritage Trust here in Melbourne in Fed Square. If you haven't been, you've got to go, where you're going to see some of the best Indigenous art in the land. Tom, hello and welcome.
Hello, David. How are you?
Very well, very well. So tell us, growing up north, on a very small island, what was it like for you?
Looking back, it was fantastic. I actually loved it. And because I was went to school on Thursday Island, which is the main administrative centre in the Torres Strait. It had electricity, it had running water, but my grandparents, because you then have the outer islands, and my grandparents lived on an outer island where there was no running water, there was no indoor plumbing. At night, we'd have to light, the kerosene lamps, the pressure lamps, no electricity. And it was fantastic, it was great.
Yeah. Running water, how'd you get by on that?
So it was all, there was a village well.
Right. Oh, wow.
So during the dry season, we would need to actually collect water from the well.
Wow.
But there were tanks, so we had tanks, and during the rainy season, it was fantastic.
Yeah.
But it was basically a bucket and tin to actually have a to bathe yourself. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And it would have been wonderful, wouldn't it? Especially considering the life you lead now. Do you go back to it very often?
I do. But now, on the islands, we have electricity, there's running water. It's all fantastic. But I look back, it was hard if I think about it for my grandparents and for aunts and uncles. My parents actually had moved off the island, but I still have this sense, there's a romantic vision I have of growing up with, every dusk you would have to come home and light the lamps. And it was all very quiet at night as well, which was a great thing. So there was no television, there was radio, but it was battery-operated radio. So.
What about, was there any animals, as in wild animals?
No, wild animals to the extent, of course, you had things like snakes and lizards. But, we had, chickens, roosters, so you'd hear the rooster crowing. Each family would have their own pigs as well, so we kept pigs. That was one of the other chores that we had to do as kids, was to go and feed the pigs in the morning and at night as well. It was a great way of recycling as well, and scraps from the table. So, it was fantastic.
Your love for cooking, did it start there?
Yes and no. Look, I was the youngest in the family, so I have two older sisters. I was the youngest and I was the only boy. And I wasn't really allowed into the kitchen, so it was my mother and sisters who would cook, and I always loved the idea of cooking. And so it sort of came out of that, seeing women cooking, a lot of traditional foods as well. But I suppose it came out of that sort of growing up in that environment, that sort of love of cooking and exploring cooking.
And you do it most weekends, your busy life, and you cook, most weekends, don't you?
And especially during COVID. COVID was fantastic because, lockdown, there was nothing to do. My partner and I, we'd obviously working from home during the week, but we'd plan, because we would go out on a Saturday find a restaurant, have a great time at a restaurant. Couldn't do that during COVID, and so cooking and revisiting the love of cooking really came out of that sort of COVID lockdown.
But also, as I mentioned in the intro, the trouble you'd go to for your lunch, just the two of you and dogs, and like your table setting. It's the real flair that you have for the whole process of cooking and sitting down for that meal.
And it was that sort of, it's not only the cooking, it's the presentation of the table. It was all part of that lead up to a Saturday planning, and in a way that sort of got us through COVID, planning for a Saturday lunch. And usually by the time we sat down for lunch, we've had a few drinks and usually we'd, I'll leave it at that.
You should go on a cooking show.
I should.
You should. I don't know why you've never been.
I have no idea.
All right, so let's talk about your journey. It's been a long journey in a way. Why did you have that hiccup? Not a hiccup, because it was a beautiful one. To go and study law. What made you change the course?
Well, because I originally trained as an art restorer. And worked in WA, as you mentioned, in Perth, then came here to Melbourne at the end of, 1989, so long ago.
You must be really old.
Oh, God. 43, David, 43. Came to Melbourne, went overseas, did an internship in Canada, came back, and that's when I met my partner, and he's also in the arts. At the time, he was working as a young assistant registrar at the National Gallery, where we met. And then, I suppose, planning our career, it was so similar that the thinking was if one of us was to move, his would be the easier career to actually transport and move rather than me in conservation. And so I had an interest in law, and thought, why not? I'll go and do law. That'll be a great compliment to my partner. And if he had to move, which he did, I could easily take my legal career with me.
And so you finished that?
Finished
law.
Finished law.
And then stepped away again, but using law.
Well, I was 10 years I practiced as a lawyer. My partner then went up to Queensland as director of the Queensland Art Gallery, and so I took my legal career up there. But that's when a certain reality cooking show came up, which sort of is a bit of a, again, I mean, look, I enjoyed law, it was fantastic. But I think I'm more a creative. I love working within the cultural sector. And so going onto this reality TV show was a circuit breaker.
It or not?
You mentioned it, Dave.
Okay, MasterChef.
Yes.
Okay, I find it fascinating because I never watched it, so I wasn't aware. It wasn't until later down the track that I realised that you'd been on it. Did you enjoy it?
I did. It was great. I mean, it was the very first season.
Oh, was it?
No one knew. I didn't know anything about MasterChef until I saw it. I think it was on Boxing Day, going to the cinema with my partner and seeing a very tiny ad in a paper. And I thought, oh, why not? I'll just I'll try doing this. And it just snowballed from there. And next thing I know, I'm in Sydney filming. Stuck in a house in, they had a house in Double Bay for all of the contestants. So it was fantastic. But it was one of those sort of things which I hadn't planned for. And it just happened. And it was good fun.
Then you ended up in Queensland at the State Library.
Yes.
What were you doing there?
So I headed up it was the Indigenous Research, Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander Research Unit at the State Library. Great projects that we were working on. One of them, which I'm very proud of, was an initiative called the Black and White Project, which was all about mentoring Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander writers and their sort of creative journey, but working with First Nations editors as well. So it was a sort of, it was looking not only at the writing, but how do we actually support people wishing to work within the industry, including as editors.
Yeah.
And yeah.
A great opportunity. And you would have learnt so much about where you're from as well, did you?
I did.
A lot of things that you wouldn't have probably known.
And also looking, because I mean, my background obviously within the arts was in the visual arts.
Yep.
And this was more of an exposure into that sort of writing and First Nations writing in that area, which was something that I hadn't experienced before. It was great actually working in that area.
Yeah. All right. So then all of a sudden you end up back here in Melbourne because of your partner.
Yes.
And you land this job. Dream job?
Dream job, yes.
Hard work? I bet it's a lot of hard work.
It was very hard work at the very start.
But also your law degree would help you, Tom, wouldn't it?
It did, it did. And it still does.
And what's it called? What's the, where you work?
So I now head up the Koorie Heritage Trust. So it's a Aboriginal cultural organisation in Fed Square, and it's all about supporting, promoting, celebrating Victorian Aboriginal people and community, but also the broader diaspora, because I mean it's acknowledging people come to Melbourne because I mean we are a creative city, so there's been this sort of First Nations from across the country coming to Melbourne as well. So it's about reflecting that, and about reflecting the fact that you actually have this living community and culture here in Victoria.
Yeah. What I also love, the spaces, and I believe there's an extra space that I haven't seen now. Is that open yet?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
And you know, there's gallery spaces. There's a great gift shop for tourists, you know, going in and out of Fed Square, and the fact is that they're buying true product, which is a very important factor. And I went there once with some English people at the beginning of the year, and they loved it because they knew that they were buying the real deal, so they really enjoyed buying stuff. But then you go upstairs, and it's all the real, you know, like, you know, sort of things that are used in everyday life. For the Indigenous community.
And for us it is about presenting that. It's a unique experience, especially for people who haven't experienced Aboriginal culture to start with, Australian Aboriginal culture, but especially Victorian Aboriginal culture as well. So it's about presenting a very unique and authentic experience, that they're the two real sort of cornerstone of what we try and do at the Trust. It's actually presenting something that's unique but authentic, and it's really about reflecting, again, like I said, Victorian Aboriginal people.
Yeah. Now, let's talk about the gallery, the exhibitions you put on there. Very important for the Indigenous community. What are you looking for? Or is it very open when you're putting an exhibition on?
I mean, it's very open, very open. It's about, I think the great thing about us, even though we're within that cultural precinct with the National Gallery of Victoria, with ACME, the Australian Centre for the Moving Images, they're much bigger organisations with a very set exhibition schedule, if I can say that. Whereas for us, we're very much about, we're quite flexible in what we do, how we do it, and who we actually present. So we have exhibitions from somebody young, emerging artists to well-established artists. We also have a fantastic collection, so it's also about showing our collection, and that collection ranges from, you know, 19th century traditional artefacts, oral history, right up to very contemporary pieces as well.
Do you get pissed off because next door to you and in the Potter Gallery is the NGV, who has got one of the best collection of Indigenous art? Do you go in there and try and steal things every night when it closes?
Well, apart from the fact that my partner actually runs the NGV. No, look, I think because we are unique in that we're just about Victorian and Victoria. The NGV have an amazing Indigenous collection, First Nations collection from across the country. I think what we have is so unique because it is just about Victoria. And to be perfectly honest, it wasn't until quite recently that the NGV actually started to collect Victorian artists. So
was that because of you?
I would like to think so. I would like to think my influence may have had something to do with that. But their focus has always been, I mean, when people think of Aboriginal art, they think, you know, Western Australia, they think Northern Territory, even Queensland, the top of Queensland. And they weren't really collecting Victoria, which is a shame. And so they're now starting to change their focus. But what we have is just something that is so purely Victorian, which I think is a good balance to what the NGV actually has.
Absolutely, absolutely. How hard is it, though, sometimes finding people to exhibit their stuff? Have you got? Are you looking for people all the time, or do a lot of people come to you?
It's not hard at all. I mean, obviously being in Melbourne, being in Victoria, we're such a creative city, we're such a creative state. In terms of our First Nations artists that are either from Victoria, have been working, or people that have actually moved to Victoria to explore, to go to RMIT University, for example, art school. There's so much talent out there. And we're also seeing a new generation and a younger generation of creatives coming through, and they're doing amazing stuff. So it's never an issue in terms of trying to find.
Just behind you and me is some of the art, and it's jewellery that we're looking at a little bit here. Very creative. Over your shoulder is this guy with this amazing gum leaf necklace. Just so interesting. So, and they're young students, obviously.
These, we run a program called the Black Design Program. It's now been going for 3 years. This is the 3rd year. And it's all about supporting, again, Victorian First Nations people who want to actually break into the design industry. The design industry, whether it's jewellery, whether it's fashion and textiles, architecture, landscape design, it's such a new area for a lot of First Nations people that this is our way of actually being able to support people going into that within a safe space as well. And so what you're seeing is the outcome from last year's program, which focused on jewellery, and we had 14, maybe 13 participants that went through. They created their own jewellery pieces.
What, within the centre? No?
Up at RMIT, so it's a partnership with RMIT. We were able to actually use the jewellery studio up there. So they produced up there and had their physical workshops up there, but then we showcased down at the Koorie Heritage Trust at the end of the year. And so the pieces you actually see on screen are from the participants from last year, but we also wanted to use for the images First Nations model. And so we had these young First Nation kids that came in that we then took images of. And I think it's just fantastic being able to actually showcase First Nations jewellery using First Nations models as well.
Absolutely. And were you selling it there as well?
They were available for sale, but because they were produced by the artists, it was up to the artists whether or not.
What's next, or can't you say
for
that program?
This year we're focusing on ceramic, and again it's a partnership with RMIT University with their ceramic department, and it's looking at ceramic as a design discipline. People think of ceramics, you think of, pots, you think of vases. So it's really about exploring how you can use clay as a design, or to create a design outcome.
And yes, you're right, because we do think of a pot, don't we? And that's it when you mention ceramics. But there are a lot of artists out there now who are really pushing the boundaries on that.
Definitely.
Front.
And I think the use of clay and ceramic is such a contemporary, it's such an exciting thing that's happening at the moment, which is brilliant.
You must be very proud of what you've achieved at the Koorie Centre.
We work as a team. I've been there for 12 years, I think.
Wow.
God, I'm due my long service leave, I tell you that. 12 years. Great team, and being able to actually produce what we do produce, I think, is just a fantastic testament of where we've come from, but working together to create what we currently have. And so our future is actually now looking at physically expanding the trust in the building that we're in, which is very exciting.
What about selling to the world? Are you looking at that at all? Is that part of it?
It is very much so. So tourism is is a big thing for us, and especially international tourism. So with COVID, coming out of COVID lockdown, I mean, that did knock us out for a bit. But it's great having the tourist market coming back into Melbourne and being located at Fed Square and such a central place. It's a great opportunity for us to actually get that tourist market into the building. But also at the end of the day, it's also about actually promoting ourselves and the work we do to the broader Australian tourism market, but also Victorian as well, because we still find in Victoria that people actually don't realise that there is this living, vibrant, creative culture here in Victoria. People do think that everything is happening up north.
Yeah. Well, I've actually had that situation because I've interviewed you on a Sunday Arts on Joy, and I've mentioned it, and people have said to me, I didn't know about the Koorie Centre, and I went, really? I find it fascinating. But then again, it takes a long time to beat that door down.
It does, and I think it's also, I mean, it goes back to this issue of colour, skin colour. I mean, there's such a, I mean, obviously Victoria's been settled for far longer than a lot of the other states, where you don't have that visible skin presence on the street. That people don't actually realise that there are Aboriginal people here. Just because you don't actually appear black, people then assume that there are no black people here in Victoria.
Okay.
As in terms of Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander.
I get what you mean. Yeah.
So there's that sort of issue that we face.
Wow.
And I think, the early days of the tourism ads, remember Paul Hogan and the shrimp on the barbie? A lot of that was very much around Northern Territory and showing what was in the Northern Territory, which was a black Aboriginal person. And that's what people actually think is Aboriginal Australia.
There you go. But what about selling internationally, especially this jewellery and with ceramics as well? Have you looked at, getting places in London, New York that are, selling your artist products?
That's the ambition. We'd love to. I mean, at the end of the day, we are still very much a small not-for-profit organisation. So our focus has really been Australia and Victoria. But, I mean, that's the ambition. We'd love to be able to actually do a much more international, have an international presence.
Yeah, so you don't take a suitcase or an overcoat and open it and say, look, would you like to buy some of this?
Not yet, David, not yet.
But talking about, expanding yourself, more so, it's not about the Koorie Trust here. But up in Cairns, you put on an art show. Tell us about that.
Well, I sit on a number of boards as well, and one of them is the Cairns Indigenous Art Fair. So I chair the board of the Cairns Indigenous Art Fair. Now, that's been going for, I think 10, 15 years. And it's an annual art fair that celebrates Queensland, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander culture. And even though it's based in Cairns itself, it's about the whole of Queensland. And the great thing is it's also about showcasing the Cape York communities, and there's some great art centres in the Cape, but also the Torres Strait as well. There are fantastic art centres in the Torres Strait, and very different to what you see in, again, the Northern Territory, Central Desert, Western Australia.
Okay, and that's still going strong.
Very strong.
Good, and you must be proud of that as well.
Yeah. I mean, I've been chair or on the board for about 8 years. I think I've been chair for about 6 or 7 of those years, and seeing it sort of evolve over those years. Again, COVID, like with any other business, had an impact, and we couldn't actually do a physical fair.
Or you couldn't have gone.
But we couldn't present because we were all in lockdown, including up in Cairns. But we were able to, and I mean, this word's been used a lot, pivot. We were able to pivot the art fair to a digital platform, which I think for all of us, we've found that's one of the great things coming out of COVID is this realization that the physical, you can also present a virtual. And the virtual sort of presence for us really was great during COVID. But we're now back to a physical art fair as well.
What about with the Koorie Centre? Like that must be your website must be an important ingredient there.
It is. So, I mean, website, but even our social media. I mean, social media is such a powerful tool these days for getting yourself out there, whether it's individually or as an organisation.
You're cooking for me to see what you had for lunch
because
yesterday.
We are Facebook friends as well.
But also, you're just now on a new board. What's that board that you've been on a couple of months?
No, that's very exciting. So towards the end of last year, I was appointed to the National Portrait Gallery of Australia board, which is just brilliant. And so the National Portrait Gallery, as you know, is in Canberra. They do fantastic things around Australian portraiture. And I think the exciting thing for me is it's a new kid on the block. I mean, it's been around for, I think, about 10 years, but compared to, the National Gallery of Australia, the museum, a lot of the state institutions, we're still very young. And so the exciting thing is what we can do as a young...
To get your name out?
To get our name out, but in terms of, there's no established convention that we're beholden to. I mean, if you're thinking the National Gallery of Victoria, I mean, it's been around since... I'm trying to think when it was set up, but it's been around for a very long time.
A long time. But also the last 10 or more years, the man that you're involved with, has done an extraordinary job. Along with his team, it's a world beater now, and when you go to exhibitions there, the media day, and there's all these people from around the world, they sing the NGV's praises.
Which is great. But even then, and I'm sure I can say this, but Tony's still, my partner, is still beholden to this history of the National Gallery of Victoria, and accountable and answerable to a lot of people who actually have a view on what the National Gallery should be. So even though he's doing amazing things, he still has to take into consideration this sort of tradition.
But what I like about the Portrait Gallery is that the photography side of it as well. And I often speak to them on Sunday Arts as well, and helping them, like get a voice down here. So when people go to Canberra, that they'll go in, because I wasn't aware of it up until about 5 or 6 years ago. So it is good, and portraiture is. It can mean so many things these days, can't it?
Exactly. So it's not just photographs. It's not just your formal portrait, a painter having painted your portrait. We've just, there's an exhibition on at the moment which is looking at contemporary ways of portraiture, which includes this amazing sculpture by Nell. Now, Nell is Carly Kwong's partner, and she's done this amazing self-portrait, but it's actually a 3D life-size sculpture of herself sitting with branches growing out of her head. It's just brilliant. But it's that sort of new exploration of what portraiture could be. And is actually, not could be, but it is.
There's there's how many boards do you sit on?
2. So I'm very conscious.
So the
Cairns and the National
Canberra.
Portrait Gallery.
All right, and then you run the CEO. Busy life.
Busy life, but it's enjoyable. It keeps me.
Off the street?
Keeps me busy.
No, you don't, because you've got 2 adorable dogs that you're
actually, I do have 2 adorable
walking.
dogs. Yes, they're very.
What are their names?
So the first one came to us already named, and her name is Daisy. And when she was a COVID baby, and then during the second COVID lockdown, we thought actually we need to get another one to keep her company, and we actually managed to get her half-brother and decided to name him Onslow. As you know, Daisy and Onslow.
And must give you so much joy.
They do.
Yeah, the dogs. Do.
Yeah. Just having a companion. Tony's actually overseas at the moment, and having 2 puppies at home, knowing that they're waiting for you to get home, the responsibility, but also the joy that they bring as well.
Yeah. And get you out.
It
makes you go for a walk as well.
Yeah.
So have you got something really exciting happening apart from the new space in Fed Square? Is there something that you're planning on that you can openly talk to us about in the future?
Yeah. So one of the key exhibitions that we're planning for the new galleries, because we will have new galleries in the expansion.
Where is it? Just next door? Is it going to be, or is it across?
Oh, no, it's in the one building. So
at the moment,
we actually have the ground floor and the top floor of this 3-story building, the Yarra building. The middle floor was occupied until the start of COVID, and the tenant moved out. And it was fantastic for us. It meant that
I didn't even realise there was something in the middle.
Yeah.
Because you just
go all the way through. So it will give us much more space, including better gallery spaces as well. And so one of the key exhibitions for early next year is a young Ballarat artist called Josh Muir, who passed away, unfortunately, quite young. He was in his early 30s.
Oh, dear.
But he was very much a rising star in the Melbourne art scene, but also as a First Nations artist as well. He was doing amazing works. He was part of he actually projected onto the NGV facade as part of the White Night Festival.
I knew the
2016.
name. Yeah.
And at that stage, I think he was in his mid-20s, 26, 27. So he passed away 2 years ago, and so we're planning a big retrospective.
Oh, fantastic.
Which is very exciting, because we all knew him personally as this young kid that was coming through.
Yeah.
We all mentored him. He was a friend, and so this is a great way of actually doing it with his partner as a guest curator. She's been fantastic, and his mother is also a guest curator. So it's very much a family sort of.
So was it hard getting the pieces, or did they have?
I know he did actually produce a large body of work, including works that we had collected, the National Gallery, a lot of institutions in Victoria, and private collections as well. So there is a large body of work.
And you brought all that in, you bring it all in.
So we bring all of that in together.
Fantastic. Oh, I can't wait for that. So when's that?
That will be in March.
March 24. Okay. Tom, thank you so much for coming in and chatting with us today.
My pleasure, David.
And congratulations on your brilliant career already. and I can't wait for your next reality show.
I'm thinking sewing.
Sewing?
So I've done cooking, I've done baking. Sewing, I think, could be the next one.
Okay. Tom, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You've been watching The Art Hunter. I'm David Hunt, and we'll see you again next week. See ya.